Hey you guys, this is Professor Vitt, and I'm just here to walk you through part of the syllabus video.
And I'm here to walk you through our syllabus. Hopefully this gives you some idea as to who I am and what the course will be like.
So first things
if you
first,
have any questions,
you are
go ahead
taking
and
an
message
online
me through
course in
Canvas.
critical
I'd be
thinking.
happy to
There are
respond
no
to them.
requirements that this
If I
course
miss
meets
something
in
here,
person at
let me
all
know.
whatsoever, but
All
I
right,
am
so
available in
you'll
my
see here we
office,
have two section numbers. We have two sections, so your section might be 72700 or it might be 72705.
Side.
Doesn't matter. I always see
opening
you, but
picture
both numbers
here
are
of
on
the brain.
syllabus.
This
All
is
right,
a course
our
in critical
governing
thinking.
image here
This
is
a
a
course
great sort
on
of right brain,
thinking
left
properly.
brain picture.
It turns out our brain isn't very good at thinking correctly on its own, and it's even
studying
worse
how your brain
at being
works
told
or doesn't
or recognizing that
and
it's
so
not
critical
doing
thinking
something
has a
properly.
lot to do with understanding
It sounds silly, but
the
it's true.
machine, for lack
Our
of a better
opening
word,
quote
the
here
organ
is
that
from
does all the
Jose
thinking. And so that's why we have
a Mexican
the
philosopher, and I
brain
want to
there
thank Professor
on the start
Garcia
of our
for
syllabus.
helping me out with this translation.
Okay, our next
I got out
page
some
will be a quote from a
garbled
Mexican
version
philosopher,
of it,
Jose
but it
Vasconcelos.
lacked
I
obviously
want to
the
thank
expertise and the quality that you would expect. So our quote is, "Only books will lift this country out of ignorant cruelty." And the idea here is that we are hoping that education will allow us to move past our prejudice, past our initial errors in thought, and move forward to a realm of knowledge where we can understand not just what is true today, but what is always true, so that we're driven by logic and knowledge and not our own personal prejudices. So that is our start there. Now, everybody always wants to know, enough with this. What am I going to get for my, how do I get an A in this class? Your grade is computed on the basis of three components. Your presentation, which comes at the very end. You get to pick the topic from a sequence of topics. A paper that you write about halfway on Roswell. It really delves into argumentation, what makes a claim extraordinary, and how we can best evaluate claims that we don't normally run into in our everyday lives. And then you have the remainder of your grade is computed by taking quizzes. So that's about 50% of your grade. So if you're doing well on the quizzes, you're doing well. And so if you're having difficulty with them, let me know. But essentially, it's a series of video lectures that simulate a classroom lecture, and then you take some online quizzes. So that's the breakdown for our grade. And remember, Long Beach City College just does A, B, C, D, F. We don't do pluses or minuses. So keep that in mind. If you're aiming for that A, you got to get the 90%. 89.9 doesn't get.
Cannot be termed rational or virtuous who obeys any authority but that of reason. And the idea is, look, this is what she's saying. If you want to be a rational person or you want to be a virtual person, then you need to start using your mind. You need to start using thought. And you can't just rely on what you think is right. You need to give that some greater foundation with your intellect. And so that's the goal here. So it kind of falls in line again with the theme of our course. Okay, student learning outcomes. These are things that you're going to be able to do at the end of the course. So bear with me if some of these things sound very strange, right? For instance, we haven't really talked about arguments. We haven't talked about induction or deduction. So some of these outcomes might seem weird. Don't worry about it. They'll be more clear at the end. The first one, analyze arguments and components of arguments. Distinguish between examples of inductive arguments and deductive arguments. And lastly, evaluate inductive arguments for strength, cogency, and or the presence of fallacies in speech or text. So that's all Greek. I'm going to try to translate it very briefly. We are going to analyze arguments, which is it's a unit of thought. It's a way of thinking so that you have a conclusion, and then you have reasons that support your conclusion. This may not seem very revolutionary to some of you, right? Well, of course you'd want to have reasons for thinking something. But in our society, we tend to live with sound bites and small little snippets rather than structured arguments. And so the goal is for you to think more deeply about the issues in your life and almost any aspect of your life through the use of a better honing of your argumentation or your ability to argue. Next, we're going to distinguish between kinds of arguments. These inductive arguments have a certain property, deductive arguments have a certain property, and you'll learn what the difference is. You'll learn how to identify that trait and how to then label them accordingly as either inductive or deductive. Lastly, you will be learning how to evaluate certain features in these arguments. That's what this really means, right? Are the arguments good? Do they commit something called fallacies? Fallacies are simply errors in reasoning. It's when somebody's not doing it right. That's an example of a fallacy. So those are our learning outcomes. All right, another quote. Doubt grows with knowledge. This is an old picture. I can't find a better resolution. But the funny thing about this picture is, one of two things is true. These people know something we don't about the universe, right? If somebody could actually do that with a thin rope, then somebody knows something about the world that I don't. Maybe how to make titanium ropes at a minimum, right? And the other idea is that this is probably a trick. And this course is about learning how to not trick yourself. And so the more that we can foster doubt in a systematic way, right, the more we can treat your brain to sort of tactics that it can use in order to think more thoroughly and more deeply, the better you're going to be. Okay, next up, just a little preview here from the Alien for our Roswell paper. Many of you probably haven't heard of Roswell. Some of you probably have. I don't know. It's always hard to say. I have some people who say, oh, yeah, of course, right? It's Roswell. And then I have other people who say, I've no idea what you're talking about. In 1947, according to the paper, the Roswell Daily Record, I think it is, a flying saucer crashed in Roswell, New Mexico. And people handled the wreckage from this crash. People claim to have seen bodies from this crash. And so we're going to use our strictest and best tools of critical thought to evaluate whether or not this actually happened. And much of the course will work this way. We're going to be studying things like ghosts and psychics, UFOs, and the reason that we do this is these are considered examples of the paranormal, or at a minimum, anomalous things. It's a fancy way of saying weird stuff, right? It's weird, right? The idea that an alien crashed in the desert. That's a strange thought, that you'd have some craft from another world crash and land, right? Why do we study that? Well, we study that because in these extreme cases where somebody says something extraordinary, like a flying saucer crashed in the desert, if you are thinking right about extraordinary claims that stretch or violate our best and current knowledge, if you understand how to think about those claims, then you're going to do fine with claims that are less extraordinary, that are less difficult to handle. Whether those claims are political or economic or social or cultural or culinary, I don't even know how you'd say that. But the point is, I'm giving you guys cases that are, well, it's almost like a sick person, right? I'm saying, look, this is a case of a person who's sick. You're a doctor. Tell me what's wrong. Something like that with Roswell. This is an extraordinary case. Tell me how to evaluate it. All right. Next up, we have a small little bit here and there on second sight. So people who claim the ability to be able to sense things without the use of their traditional five senses, usually their mind. What they detect is either the future or the distant past or some other realm. We'll look an awful lot at perception in this course and how our mind doesn't really accurately perceive the world, but it does its best job. So we'll be examining perception and how it works in the human brain and how it can go wrong. And sometimes those errors in perception lead to even bigger errors in thought down the road. We'll cover memories. It turns out your memory is actually not very good at all, and it's not a slight to you in any way. It's just that we have a tendency to think that our memories are better than they are. And so in those cases, what we want to do is make ourselves aware of the failures of memory so that we don't put too much weight on it, or we at least make our reliance on our memory proportional to its reliability. Right, so, okay, and then another little governing slogan here for the course. I try to break it up, try to make it a little more interesting for you guys. control your mind or someone else will. Unfortunately, there's really a germ of truth in this. Now, here I don't mean literally controlling your mind and they're beaming you and they've got, now all of a sudden they put this thing on your head and they can control you with a game controller. No. When I mean control your mind, I mean something more like learn to think properly and know when your brain is about to fool you. I know this sounds strange, but your brain is better at fooling you than anyone else. And so I hope that you'll learn when your brain starts to fool you in this course. You can keep yourself a little more sane that way. Okay, so now we're going to move on to some of the text here. We've got some duplications here. This is our book by Jonathan Smith, Pseudoscience and Extraordinary Claims of the Paranormal. This book is great for some things, and it's not so great for other things. In particular, the way that Smith views religion, I think some people, I think it's fair to say, find it objectionable. They feel like, to the extent that he talks about it, he kind of gives it a short shrift. He just kind of seems to be dismissive of it. We don't really cover those parts of the book, but I understand when students make those claims why they feel that way. We don't really cover that stuff, so don't worry about it. So he kind of has a bias, but he's actually really good at teaching us cognitive biases and things like that. So it's a good book, and it's a fun way to learn critical thinking. You can teach this course many different ways. You can teach a critical thinking course on current issues. This course is done in a way that it's fun. We get to talk about ghosts and psychics and things like that. So that's the focus of this book. We've gone through the grading policy and the grades. Here are some additional forms of contact for me: Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Usually the students prefer messaging me through Canvas all the time, and I prefer receiving messages through Canvas all the time. So that would be my primary. But look, if you're dying and you can't get a hold of me or something, then please try these. If I get, when I get that message, and I check them regularly, I'll get right back to you. So let me know. Dropping the course, just a quick note. This is really more for your protection than it is for me. Some students genuinely don't know that you can't just email the professor and say, hey, I want to drop the class. Well, unfortunately, you cannot do that. You actually have to go to admissions and records and do it yourself. So if you want to drop the course at some point, go ahead and do it through A&R. I'm not the person who runs that. Class participation. There's one big rule on this, and it's this. Keep up with the modules. Once a module is closed, it's closed forever. So if you have a time in your schedule this fall where you're not going to be available, or hey, Professor Vitt, and I'll go through the class schedule at the bottom, email me ahead of time and I will be happy to work with you. It's no problem. I understand. And occasionally things happen in our lives and things are late, or you're not going to get something done. Email me ahead of time, or rather message me through Canvas ahead of time, and I'll definitely work with you. But if you feel like, gosh, I'm taking this course, but I'm just not going to be able to log in but once a month, you won't do well in the course. Students who do well in this course tend to log in regularly. They make sure that they're up to date on stuff. Okay, content disclaimer. I have it written here very beautifully. Well, I don't know that it's written very beautifully, but I have it written out here. And this course deals with some controversial topics because people have very deeply held beliefs about some of the things that we talk about, right? So I've had students who've given a presentation on when they were 7 years old, they saw their grandfather's ghost, right? They went in and they analyzed it. This course, I'm not here to tell you guys, no, you didn't see your grandpa, or no, you absolutely did. In some sense, I don't care what your beliefs are. It doesn't impact my life in any way. But I do care that they are your own beliefs, that you hold them for yourself, and you have good reasons for thinking things. So I'm not here to teach you what to think. I'm here to help you learn how to think. And so keep that in mind. I'm not going to message you and say, hey, Gabriel, do you really believe in this or not? And if you don't, I'm going to give you an F. I've had students all across the board. I've had students who are like, I believe in crystals and their healing powers, and I've had students who say that stuff did not affect their grade in any way. So when we look at skeptical arguments concerning some of these issues, you just need to know what the arguments are and understand them. You don't have to necessarily agree with the arguments. You're absolutely entitled to your own opinion in this course and in life, and you shouldn't allow other people to force you to think a certain way, for any reason. You should stick to your guns and go with what you think is correct. All right. Internet access. You will absolutely need internet for this course, but if you're listening to this video right now, you're good. You know that you're good. So also make sure your email account is registered, although it shouldn't be with Moodle. That's okay. That's okay. We're going to be using Canvas for this course. Okay. Next thing, academic integrity and plagiarism. Sometimes people get really busy when they're writing a paper, and they either forget to say, oh, I took this paragraph from this other person and I put it in my paper, and they don't put it in quotes, right? When that happens, it's very obvious. It's always very clear to me, I like to think anyway, when students are taking other people's writing and using it as their own. If you're doing a paper and you're researching something and somebody says something just so great and I can't even make that sentence any better. You don't need to. You put the sentence in quotes, you identify who it comes from, you cite it, and then you explain what the quote is talking about. When you take this course, you are the one who's taking this course. You're certifying that you're the person who is taking this course through Long Beach City College, and it's not your cousin, in North Carolina or whatever. So please make sure that the work that you turn in is your own. And if you're using a source for your paper or your writing, attribute that source. Okay. I have some student resources here to follow: Success Center, Access, Veterans Center, Career and Job Services Center. The one thing I will say is I really encourage you guys to use these services. Take, for instance, Career and Job Services Center. They'll look at your resume. They'll talk to you about, what your skills are. They'll help you get oriented. This is a process that I have a friend, and he has actually spent over $1,000 to have someone else rewrite his resume. So that's a lot of money. And of course, it's a really high-end resume, and it's a high-end market that he's in and so forth. So I can see it. But why would you pay to have somebody review your resume when you can go down to the services center and have somebody who does it all the time do it for free, right? This is true. I mean, these services are set up for you guys, and people don't use them. It's a crying shame. So I encourage you guys to make use of that stuff. We have a great Veterans Affairs office too. Okay, these are our assignments. The assignment sheet is a tentative schedule, and what that means is it could change. Now, it's happened before where I get a lot of students tell me, gosh, we're covering memory and I just can't get through this quickly enough. Is there something else we can do to kind of, can I have a couple more days or whatever? I'm happy to extend that. I'm never going to change the schedule to penalize you. Like, oh, the paper was due on the 30th, but I'm going to make it due on the 15th, before. I'll never do that. So if I make changes in the schedule, it's to give you more time, right? Not less. So please don't feel like I'm going to change, tell you when we're going to do stuff and then change it on you without notice. That wouldn't be fair. All right. Late assignments, no makeup assignments. So if you think you're going to be late on something or you're not going to make it through a module, let me know ahead of time, and I'm easy to work with. When the module closes, that's a little bit tougher because I'm not able to, it's just tougher at that point. So let me know if you're going to be late on something. I'm very reasonable. I'm happy to work with you. Stuff happens, right? All the time. So no problem there. Discipline and classroom decorum. Look, to the extent that we do chat rooms and stuff like that or forums, it's important that you are polite in them. No personal attacks, right? But honor people have different ideas, very different ideas sometimes about the world and how it all goes. And when that happens, celebrate the difference, but you don't have to attack the person personally. All right. Academic freedom. Look, some of the stuff that we're going to cover in here are kind of adult topics, right? I mean, you are going to be exposed to something in this course that conflicts with your personal beliefs. It's almost a guarantee. When that happens, I mean, I understand, but by no means am I forcing you to accept ideas, and so forth. Just know that part of education is being exposed to things that are uncomfortable, that are unpleasant, that are something that you might object to. And that makes for a better education for you, right? You have a more round and complete understanding of the position that you disagree with after having been exposed to it. It's kind of like your immune system in a virus, right? Or a vaccine. You get a weakened form of the virus in there. Well, I'm kind of doing that with some of the stuff in this class, right? I'm going to give you versions of arguments that you may not like, or you're going to think they're bad. You'll have great reason to either accept or attack or disagree with, right? All of these arguments because you've seen them before and you know how they work. So there'll be a little crossfire. Class attendance. This is actually very poorly done here. I will erase this on your syllabus. This section will not appear. You will just see this. Class attendance, the only thing that you will need to do is log in regularly, and you should be fine. Okay, general guidelines, grammar, spelling, punctuation, all of that stuff counts, for or against your grade. Now, I'm not teaching an English class, so I'm not going to die if there's a comma splice, but you need to start working toward that standard of college texts, right, where all of your sentences start with capital letters and you're writing properly. Writing is a process, and it takes time to get better at it, so keep that in mind. Do your best to try and sharpen up some of your editing and so forth, because it does count a little bit towards your grade. Particularly that's true when, for instance, somebody's made some kind of compositional mistake in drafting a sentence so that the sentence just is not intelligible. It just doesn't make sense, right? It's like sometimes writing can get to a point where you're cleaning up something else and you just leave a sentence or two there that you meant to delete, and then those sentences are just impossible, right? They don't make any sense. So make sure we edit and so forth accordingly.
These events. Now, things may not unfold exactly like this. We may keep a module open a little bit later. I may open a module earlier, but I will never ever reduce your deadline. In other words, if I change any of these dates, they're always to the benefit of students. So and it occasionally happens, I get a flood of emails from students or people come by my office and say, I'm dying on exam 1. Okay, if we absolutely need to change it or do something differently, then we will. So I'm pretty reasonable with regard to that. However, the course does take place modularly, which means when February the 19th comes, it's done and we have to move on. So don't feel like, oh yeah, I'm going to log in on February the 16th. I'm going to just crank it for 72 hours and do all the work. It'll probably turn out you won't be able to. You won't have enough time to. So make sure you log in as these things go on. So couple of bright points here. April the 1st, we have no classes. It is spring break. Roswell paper assignments will take place in about the middle part of March. So when you guys go on your spring break, you won't have anything. And your individual presentation is going to be due on June the 4th. But you'll have plenty of time to get it done. Okay, so that should cover it for our relevant dates. If you guys have any questions or comments, the absolute best way to get in touch with me is to contact me through Canvas, through the LMS itself, and I'd be happy to hear from you. Thanks a lot.